And we're live.
Perfect. Okay. If there are any other questions, I'm going to ask that you hold them until the end of my little spiel, because it's going to be difficult to get through and I want to get through it once, and then I will answer any questions that anyone has. I will be glad to direct you to any resources. If I touch on anything and you want to know more about it, I will gladly point you to more resources. I am very much not the expert. I am just someone who has done a fair amount of digging. So if you want to look for more, I will be happy to point you to that when we finish for the evening. Also, the Wikipedia page for the Judge Rottenberg Center is very detailed and very well sourced and contains a lot of information on all this stuff. So if you need a place to start there. Now, one of the things that is dangerous about the Judge Rottenberg Center in particular is they found a legal gray area by changing up the terminology. So terminology that we would use by referring to something as treatment or punishment, or in my case, torture, because that's what the UN calls it. So I'm gonna go with the UN on this one. They've made up their own terms so that they can't be argued with, or they've used old terms so that they can't be argued with. And one of the prominent terms that keeps coming up is behavioral modification. Behavioral modification is more often a term used for dogs than people. So behavioral modification therapy in animals is things like shock collars and electric fences. So the theory behind behavioral modification is that if you exhibit a behavior that we do not like, we will punish you in such a way that you will not do it again. So the systems that the JRC are using apply that to people with various disabilities. Majority of the residents at this point have autism, we believe, but there are a variety of different disabilities present. And when someone presents a behavior that the center views as abnormal, they will be punished for it with different methods. The one we hear about the most when it comes to the center is electric shock. The center has patented a system that belongs only to them, that only they use, that will apply electric skin shock to various parts of the body. Now, there are conflicting arguments about this. The JRC tries to suggest that they only use this method when someone is exhibiting self-endangering behaviors, right? So when a person is headbanging, or a person is pulling their own hair, or wanting to harm someone else, etc. But survivors from the institution have let us know that this is not the case, and that they were shocked for a variety of unavoidable tendencies and behaviors and tics that people with those particular disabilities cannot avoid. Michael, I think you have my list. Can you rattle off what the list of punishable offenses is, please?
Absolutely, yes. So we are definitely talking about behaviors that are absolutely mundane and considered to be normal, and, as Taylor aptly put it, inevitable in children of any neurostatus, let alone neurodivergent. So we're talking about failure to be neat, wrapping one's foot around the leg of a chair, stopping work for more than 10 seconds, closing one's eyes for more than 5 seconds, minor acts of noncompliance, using the bathroom without permission, urinating on oneself after being refused the right to use the bathroom, screaming while being shocked, attempting to remove the GED, which is the jargon they use for the electroshock that they patented, tics, which are by definition involuntary, removing one's coat, speaking out of turn, and making noises.
This isn't a complete list. This is just the list that we can confirm based on the survivors we've met, but there are clearly others. There are clearly other reasons to be punished. One of the survivors I spoke to, named Jennifer, very succinctly put it: anything that you did that they found annoying was grounds for punishment. the machines that are being discussed are constant. If electroshock is on your plan, you wear the machine at all times. When showering, when sleeping, when eating, at all hours of the day. And the shocks are administered by an official with a button who you can't always see. And the machines have been known to go off at random. So one of the things that witnesses wanted me to get across to you very succinctly is that not only is the shock torturous, we're talking about more voltage than they use in cattle prods, but the knowledge of it, the knowledge that you could be shocked at any moment and not know why, the knowledge that you could be shocked in your sleep, the knowledge that you could be shocked while trying to shower is equally as traumatizing, because you end up being afraid to sleep. You end up being afraid to communicate with other students. You end up being afraid to do anything that might get you into trouble because the memory of the shock is so persistent. And one of the ways that that people who have talked about this topic up until now have maybe narrowed it a bit too much, including me, is that the cause has been largely focused on the shock. The cause has been largely focused on how do we eliminate the shock. And of course, this is a huge problem, and it was already banned once by the FDA. But the problem with that method is it leaves out all the other methods of torture that the center has been known to use and was able to continue to use even while the shock was banned. Jennifer, who I spoke with, gave me a testimony about the way food is used against them, and the fact that if shock is not on your plan, one of the more common methods is food deprivation. It has been determined in several studies that students are getting perhaps 20% of their needed daily nutritional intake, if that. Michael, can you read Jennifer's blurb for us, please?
Absolutely, yes. We have a survivor from JRC who gave us a very clear description of what we're talking about when we cut through the jargon that the center uses. She states, "I was only on it for a short time, but I know people who are on that for years. If you have one of those behaviors that they don't want, they'll make you throw out your meal or pieces of your meal. They will divide it up into little cups, and if you talk or don't answer within 5 seconds, the cup is thrown away. Your food disappears little by little until there's nothing left. And at the end of the day, you'd get a nasty concoction with liver powder all over it." This is a quote by Jennifer Msumba, who survived and I believe spoke directly with Taylor. And the liver powder she's referring to is specifically designed to be as unpalatable as possible as a form of punishment.
In some areas of the world, it is also used on prisoners, just as reference. These are not the only methods the JRC employs. They've also been known to use restraints for very long periods of time. They've also been known to rely on sensory deprivation, which in this case is a helmet that limits your visual field and increases white noise to a point that you can't process what's going on around you. One of the students at the JRC died while in this condition, tied to a bed and experiencing sensory deprivation. There have been several deaths in the JRC. If you want to know more about those people, their names and causes are listed on the Wikipedia. I'm not going to read them to you because I will not be able to do it in one piece. One of the stories I want to make sure I touch on, because this is a story we know really well, and one of the reasons why it's so astonishing that the JRC still operates, is the story of a young man named Andre who for refusing to take off his coat was fastened to what's called a 4-point board. So that means put on a table and restrained from his wrists and his ankles, and shocked, we believe 31 times. I went back and counted in the video. I think we settled on 31. He was found by his mother the following day to be conscious but unresponsive. She could not communicate with him. And when they took him to the hospital, he was covered in third-degree burns. It took him multiple days to regain his ability to speak. His is not the only case, but that particular instance was video recorded by the center. So if you care to look for it, that footage is all over the internet. I'm not going to show it to you, but if you wish to see it, it is there, which is one of the many reasons why I'm astonished that the center has continued to operate at this pace, because there has been footage of this for several years. So the brutality of the practice is no longer deniable. The reason I'm choosing not to show you the footage, even though it's been all over the news, is because I will hear his screams in my head for the rest of my life, and I do not wish to subject all of you to that. If you're sitting here like I was a couple of weeks ago wondering, how is this still happening? Why has nothing been done? How is this even still possible? The answer is that there have been various court cases, various attempts through committees in charge of medical rulings, committees in charge of school rulings, and time after time after time, the JRC escapes because they have boxed themselves into this strange gray area. They're not a school, so they're not having the rules of a school held over them. They're not hospitals, so they're not having the rules of the hospital held over them. They are a behavioral institution. So they have found a pigeonhole in which to function where they cannot be challenged up to this point. We managed with previous protests to get the FDA to ban the use of the shock, but we believe from people who are inside the facility that the shock did not end when the ban was in place, and that because of COVID, they have been able to continue their practices unaltered. So now that I've dumped all that grief and complication on you, I'm going to say that I brought you here because I believe there is hope. I would not have brought you here if I did not believe there was a door we could knock on to fix this. And I do believe that there is. And I think that the way to put a stop to this once and for all is to go through the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice has a branch focused specifically on civil rights and civil rights violations. That position has been recently refilled thanks to the Biden administration, so we have new minds and new eyes to appeal to. So when we finish this talk and we hear from our poets to sort of re-energize and regroup and recenter ourselves, I'm going to give you information about who to write to at the Department of Justice and a sample of what your letter might look like. But the thing I implore you to do, and I'm going to say this more than once because it is super important, is do not copy and paste the letter I wrote. They will throw them in the trash. If more than one piece of mail comes through that looks exactly the same, it is treated like spam mail and they will not read them. Personalize the letter. Personalize the letter. Make it come from you or they will not read them. This is important. I'm also going to link you to a place where you can file a complaint online with the civil rights folks at the Department of Justice. I recommend you do both. If you're able, I recommend you both write a letter and file an online complaint. I will be doing this, and I hope you all will as well, because the more doors we knock on, the better. We need to make this clear that this is a direct civil rights violation and has been one since the center's inception. This is not a small issue. This is not an agenda of a particular group. This is a vulnerable population whose civil rights are being stomped all over because the center has found a corner in which to hide themselves. I accidentally closed my notes in the middle of my thought here, so I'm trying to recollect what the next thing I was going to say was, but in the meantime, Ona, Michael, do you have anything you want to jump in and say?
I do. I apologize to everyone. I'm so sorry. I don't think I can change the auto caption settings event from what I'm seeing right now. I'm continuing to try and figure out how to do that. So my deepest apologies for being unable to do so. Hopefully we will be able to put together a transcript for anybody who does want to be able to review everything today. And again, my sincere apologies. I'm continuing to figure out if there's a way to do that without knocking everybody off and having to start over.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or concerns they want to address before we move on from here and kind of take a deep breath and move to the next step?
Since we don't have the transcript, it would be helpful if you could put what you want us to do in the chat, maybe while other things are going on.
Yes, I will absolutely put the link to the file with all the letter writing information in the chat. I already have it made. I just have to pop the link in. Actually, Mike and Ona, you both have that link. Can one of the two of you pop that in the chat, please?
Absolutely, yes. I'm going to do that shortly, Patricia. And I apologize again to everybody. I totally understand the importance of being able to make this accessible in as many ways as possible. So if there aren't other questions about that, there is something that does come to mind that is, I think, riffs off of so much of the vital things that Taylor is telling us. And that's that this story, as Taylor really acutely pointed out to me as we were just preparing for today, is something that seems to really suffer from the cycle of public consciousness. Just the way our outrage and our own kind of inherent nervous response to outrageous and offensive things that happen within our own country is somewhat cyclical, and something that, you know, when we stop hearing about, we begin to focus on other outrages just because we don't have a way of communicating with each other yet that really is, I think, suitable to just how many intersectional issues are entangled in all of the social justice movements that are going on at any given point, for lack of a better term. And I, for one, really want to thank Taylor for really reframing this in that way for me. And I would love to just pass that along very briefly, because I imagine if any of you are like me, you did have some questions about how on earth has this gone on for so long. Taylor made a really good points in breaking down how they have really obfuscated the system and rules in order to find these legal gray areas where they can operate. But also the question of how the residents of Massachusetts and the residents of this country have been able to continue about our daily lives while the most needy among us are experiencing conditions that are, literally on par with an Abu Ghraib. And I think that speaks a lot to our own internal clocks and cyclical nature of things. You have one place pass a judgment, as Taylor discussed, with the FDA banning the devices for in certain circumstances a few years ago, and then we start to put our eyes elsewhere. And it's a morbidly fascinating phenomenon. And reading the comments every time something gets published about this, you see that same outrage of, my God, where were we on this? How are these kids, how's this happening to these kids in our backyard? And I think today is exactly the antidote to that. It's because of courageous folks like Taylor and Ona, who are willing to invest their own emotional energy in really being the town crier for something that's very deeply unpleasant to cry about, for lack of a better term. So I just wanted to get that in there while I have my own little tiny soapbox here, because I'm really proud to be able to provide even a small assist as far as that goes.
Thank you, Michael.
Taylor, could you say something about the history of the center and who they are and how kids wind up there?
Yes, absolutely. I had that in my original presentation and then I just went blank. I'm not going to give you the whole detailed history of the center because there are a lot of cases that were filed and arguments that have been had and different people having different discussions about this. I can link you to those resources if they interest you, but the the long and the short of it is that the center has been in operation since the 70s and has always been accused of extreme practices, but has gotten around it by saying that we're the last stop, we're the last resort. When parents don't know what else to do with their kids, when families don't know what else to do with their relatives, we're the last stop. So of course we're extreme, and of course you don't get it, and of course it looks bad because we're dealing with the most extreme cases, and so we have to take extreme measures. And the reality is that those who are underage or who are incapable of signing for themselves, parents sign agreements to let these activities occur. Judges sign individual, I keep wanting to call them decrees, but that's not what they are, individual statements saying that this individual person is allowed to be shocked, this individual person is allowed to undergo this method or that method. But the reality of the situation is parents I've met with felt as if they were misinformed, miseducated, misled, and that they were told that these practices weren't harmful, and that their children would be safe, and that their children would come out of the facility more normal. And that's the thing I keep hearing is the Rottenberg Center tells the court, we're about safety. We're about protecting these people from themselves. And what the history tells us is they're about normalcy. They're about torturing people until they become shells of themselves who do not behave outside of the norm, who do not behave in a disability-specific fashion. But I can tell you the only way to take involuntary disability behaviors out of a person is to strip them of their personhood and their personalities and their functions. If you can push a person to that point, you have spooned their insides out in order to achieve that end. And I think a lot of people misinterpret this as an issue of safety, as an issue of parents protecting their kids, because that's what these parents are sold. But the reality of the situation is they are in danger, and they are being put in danger by an institution that promises the impossible to parents who don't know what else to do. And truthfully, I desperately want to believe that that's all that it is, that all of the people who have committed their family members to this institution were misled, but some of them, it seems, are unconcerned. Some of them, it seems, are more concerned with not having to deal with this person than for their safety and health and function. And so anyone who will take this person off of their hands and quiet them down and sort of make them more palatable, they are willing to tolerate this. I say that because when the shock was repealed and the UN declared this as a function of torture, parents came back and said, but my child needs this, but my child can only be controlled this one way, but my child needs this, please, please, please. And that's one of the main reasons why the ruling was overturned. It was overturned on a technicality and because parents came to the judge and begged. And as someone who is disabled myself, it is unfathomable to me that this could happen, that parents and family members could make the choice that it's more important that you have a silent child than a living one, and that you want so desperately to undisable your child that you are willing to risk them in this way. But that seems to be the case. It seems that the risks are taken willingly sometimes, as is evident by the fact that Andre's case was all over the news. We know for the fact he was covered in third-degree burns. We know this, and there are still parents signing off on the shock all these years down the road. As someone who was asked in the early 90s, my parents were asked, are you going to keep her? I still get a pit in my stomach at the idea that the parents who had to make the other choice, their kids ended up in places like this. Did I cover it, Ona?
May I quickly add something?
Please.
I think it's important that people are aware, who may not be aware of this, that disability rights activists have been protesting the JRC for 45 years about, and that there have been multiple times that there have been attempts to shut aspects of it or the whole place down. And most recently, there was some progress but the legislative interventions were overturned. And I think that's very important in terms of the political context we're talking about. And the other thing I want to say, and yes, this is being recorded and I'm okay with that. I flipped them off before when you were talking about how they behave. So I was on camera doing that. I'm wearing a shirt from the Live On Network that mentions disability pride and disability awareness. And the t-shirt is from liveon.net. And the orientation here is to support and empower disabled youth in understanding as they grow up that they have the right to exist and live a full and meaningful and loving life. And so another element that I think is important to say, and again, it's recorded and I don't care, that's okay with me. Autism Speaks has this long and rich behind the scenes relationship with this center. And people who would like to articulate their belief that Autism Speaks has some value still, I have absolutely no doubt some people still feel this way, despite the robust evidence to the contrary and all the advocacy on the part of ASAN and the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, the ASAN. But Autism Speaks is notoriously behind the scenes on some of these activities, and that's not, a phantasmagorical appointment that I'm making. It's actually been shown to be true.
Thank
It's
you.
terrifying what Diana's pointing out. I'm so sorry to cut you off, Taylor. But yeah, I think the mobilization efforts behind this are able to happen through these organizations that, in my mind, are almost zombie advocacy groups, ones that are so completely disconnected from the minds of the minds and hearts of the people they are supposedly supporting, and have had so much disability rights rhetoric slip into their organization that there is no way that anyone who is uninformed can pull the wool over their eyes anymore. It just takes a quick Google to see where Autism Speaks stands on things. And my apologies if Taylor brought this up too, but a thing of personal outrage for myself as a social worker was when she educated me to the fact that by JRC's own reports, some 90% of these pupils that they are taking in are folks from New York City, people of color, who in many cases are likely to have less access to the information that can give them the red flags about this place. People, I am imagining, who really have very, very few places to turn and can be sold a very false narrative about what it is that they offer. And I see that JC Todd has a hand up. Taylor, would you like to pass it to her unless there's something else you wanted to add first?
Yeah, sure. The link for the letter writing information is in the chat if anybody needs it. I'll make sure I mention it again, but it's in the chat for those looking for it, and we'll talk about it again at the end. Yes, JC?
I have to unmute. It's a simple question, and it's a question because I'm not informed about this, but I don't know what Autism Speaks is, and Diane was mentioning that it is an advocacy organization that doesn't seem to be advocating in the right direction. So I just wondered if I could just have a little information about what it is.
Autism Speaks is a large advocacy group. I do this because not a fan, who have kind of represented what it means to speak up for autism in the wider consciousness for a long time. If you've ever seen a blue puzzle piece associated with autism, that's where that comes from. That's those guys. But a lot of their advocacy is centered around curing autism and sort of fixes for autism, and doesn't take into account what autistic adults are asking for. And it seems to me hinges on fear to parents. It seems to me they're very much obsessed with, your child is in trouble unless we X, unless we cure them, unless we do this or that, as opposed to offering therapies and supports and what have you, which is what's other organizations that are operated by autistic people themselves have been doing forever. As Diane mentioned very correctly, if you were looking for autism advocacy information, I would point you to the Autism Self-Advocacy Network. They're much more centered by people with autism advocating for themselves rather than the fear of family members and caregivers, et cetera, ad nauseum. Long story short, don't give money to anything with a blue puzzle piece on it ever. And note that Autism Speaks is dangerous.
Thank you very much.
I put in the chat the tag for Autism Speaks from the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, which has repeated links to a fact sheet that has image and textual content, so it's accessible and broadly construed. And it talks about the history of Autism Speaks and its notorious, infamous treatment of autistic people.
Good catch, thank you.
They were founded by multimillionaires and billionaires and people who run in President Trump's circle.
You? I
And
didn't even know that bit.
oh yeah, and he's a big fan of them. He supports them a lot.
Ooh.
And they succeed in part by getting donations from other millionaires and by putting a lot of money back into fundraising. And their original slogan was that we speak for people with autism because they are incapable of speaking for themselves. And they have in their entire history only once had a person with autism connected to their board. And that person tried for 2 years and then stepped off the board because they were a token and never allowed to contribute. They are really a nightmare.
Thank you. I thank you for those of you who know more specifically about Autism Speaks than I do for throwing your hats into the ring. That isn't usually my particular corner of activism, but I'm just aware of the toxic nature of the group. If you're not speaking, please mute your mics, folks. We're getting feedback noises.
So, unless anyone else has questions or wants to riff off of, the many really poignant ideas that we have already put out there today, Taylor, I think we are ready to move on to the next portion here, but I also don't want to cut anyone off. If you have a stray thought, now is a great time to raise it because this is a safe place to ask. There are no dumb questions.
Absolutely. If you have any questions, throw them our way. If I can't answer it or Ona can't answer it, there are a lot of really brilliant and educated activists here who will jump in on our behalf. So you have the best room if you have a question.
Well, I'll just briefly add that aside from the intention behind what's being done here, there's a terrible parallel. And I'll just highlight quickly, this is Diane. And so Autism Speaks doesn't speak for me is a very well-known slogan in the autistic rights movements abroad and locally and on the domestic side, if you will, here on unceded land where most of us are in what's called the United States. And $, is one of the famously used autistic activist, scholar, and neurodivergent pride responses to Autism Speaks, which is AS. So instead it's $, because $, of course, looks a lot like an S. So, but the parallel I want to make is that this is very triggering what I'm about to say, not that the rest of this hasn't been. The Action 5 or Actian T4, the Actian T4 action, depending on your pronunciation, T4 project, which was started by the Nazis when they brought the first experimental efforts to try to annihilate swaths of human life in the eugenical project in the Second World War. The people they started with were disabled children, and the way that they persuaded family members to donate their children for these experiments and for their murder was by telling them they were going to help them. And the discourse that period gives us, which has been made more presently available by people like Kenny Freeze and Brenda Brueggemann's activist scholarly work. The language that the Nazis used to talk about how they were helping the kids was so similar to the discourse used and the rhetoric used by the Judge Rottenberg Center. Someone really needs to try to bring that up more than unfortunately is often the case. it's almost identical at eugenical discourse, and let us help you with the children is embedded underneath what is ultimately about torture, violence, and murder.
As someone who almost completed a minor in Holocaust and genocide studies and who did my thesis specifically on disability in the Holocaust, you're right. The images are startlingly similar. There's a famous piece of black and white film where a bunch of Nazis drive through a neighborhood, picking up visibly disabled kids and put them into an ambulance to take them into what is supposed to be a hospital. And then you realize that the ambulance has been turned into a gas chamber, and the ambulance is back feeding from the exhaust pipe. And you sort of hear the doom come for these kids. And it's all I can think about as I hear the footage of Andre being tortured, of all the horrible nastiness that comes out of the Judge Rottenberg Center, is that sort of doom music of you're watching these parents hand their children over, either knowingly or unknowingly, to these incredibly dangerous people in hopes that it will lead to some version of normalcy that isn't desirable in the first place. Okay. Okay, if nobody else has any questions, if you have one, throw it at me. But if nobody else has any questions, I'll take a couple of seconds, take a deep breath, bring ourselves back into our bodies, and then Ona, we can start with the reading portion of the evening. Yes?
JC, your hand is up. Do you have a question, or is that from before?
Her button is stuck. Yes, Mary Lisa.
I forget to take it down. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Mike, and who was just speaking, Marianne, I think, was just speaking about the Holocaust. And, one of their slogans is never forget. And in the beginning, Mike was talking about how we do tend to forget things, but then they're cyclical and they keep happening and happening. And, you think, well, there's DIFUS for child abuse. And there are even places that you can call that will take animals away from their owners if their owners abuse them. And yet this happens, and it's so closely related to the trauma of child abuse. I'm not saying it's, that I'm like parents that burn their children with cigarettes or hold their hands over fire to teach them lessons, or children who never know what they're going to walk into, is sort of like that shock, so I think they're very closely related. So yeah, this is very triggering. And I want to do everything I can to help. So thank you for including me in this.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
In the material that you sent to us originally, Taylor, it seemed to me as if this ruling from the District of Columbia Circuit Court in favor of these people, these torturers, was argued by two lawyers from two law firms. I don't know which law firms these are, but I'm guessing that there must be a fair amount of money behind the ability of the lawyers to argue in front of this federal court. I wonder where this money is coming from. Do we know where JRC is getting money? It's supposed to be a nonprofit, but who's funding this?
Well, of course, they're going to sit tightly on those records, but what I can find looking into their public tax record is that, one, they're getting funding from their state. Don't ask me how.
Massachusetts, amazing. Yeah.
And some parents are paying for this. We can't figure out how much, and we can't figure out which ones, but some parents are most definitely paying for this, even if it's under the table and quietly. There's definitely money coming in from parents of patients or insurance companies of patients. But There's a lot of revenue streams happening, but the biggest one, it seems, is government support, because the facility is claiming that they take impossible cases, right? That these are people who can't go anywhere else. And so they get government funding so that those people don't cause the government any problems. And so it seems to be a split revenue stream that's going that way. I don't know from what pot they paid for the lawyers. I haven't looked. But there are definitely multiple pots sort of moving about. I think the main reason they're a nonprofit is because that was sort of the third option, right? You're either a hospital, you're a private school, or you're a nonprofit institution. Like, those are the only three things that this place could be. And had they been a hospital or a private school, there are people in charge of this who could have handled it already. Like, because all of the officials from those categories have been into the building at different times and basically said, there are problems here, but not our problems, and sort of pass it on to the next facilitators, who then decided it wasn't their problem, who then decided it wasn't their problem, et cetera, ad nauseum. So it's sort of a case of hot potato that's been going on since it looks like the 70s. And I'm sorry if I didn't make it clear from the beginning that this isn't new and that there have been people working on this for a very long time. I'm very much at the younger end of the activist train, and I understand that. And there's a ton of history and effort put into putting an end to this, but it hasn't worked up until now because all the other doors have been knocked on. But I'm hoping that the one that we're pushing at the Department of Justice, because it is a new door, will be a new door we can kick down, so to speak. Hence why I'm asking you all to both write letters and file the digital reports. The links for that are in the chat, because I think if we put it in front of them, not as a disability specific issue, not as a children's specific issue, but as this is a civil rights violation of citizens, do something about it, then the Civil Rights Division can't claim to not do something about it. Did you have
I think Mary Lisa has a question. I'm sorry, Taylor, didn't mean to interrupt.
Did you have a question, Mary Lisa, or is your button stuck?
No, I'm good. Is my hand, my hand still is up. Do I have to put it down?
It's a lovely hand though, so don't be ashamed of your hand. Very briefly, I agree very much with your points that you made before, Mary Lisa, and to your point and your question, I think is so right at the heart of the matter. And my research definitely reflects exactly what Taylor said, that they have really benefited from the jurisdictional ambiguity of the issue. So that's why going up to the federal civil rights door seems to be the really smart place to be banging on, as Taylor pointed out.
Okay, I think we're good. Any final questions before we take a deep breath and then jump into poetry to sort of resort our brains before we talk about sending our letters out?
I think the people are ready for the poems, Taylor. I think I certainly am ready to hear some language purposed in order to really speak to the human part of us that I feel like is just so rendered helpless feeling by what we're talking about. And I'm eager to hear you guys read. Okay, great. Ona, you're usually the one who does names for us. Do you want to start us off in the poet's direction?
I will, and I'm not sure that everybody on the list that I have is here, and there may be people here that would like to read a poem that I don't know about, but I will go through the list and then we'll see if there's anyone I missed. So Mary Lisa, we have you first. Are you ready to share a poem with us?
Yes, I'm ready.
Wonderful.
Sorry, I have to find it. You would think I would have it bookmarked. It's my own poem.
You're worth a bookmark, Mary Lisa.
That's so
Worth the
sweet.
wait.
Is this it? No. I'm so sorry. And I don't think it gives pages. I think it gives names, right? Wait, let me see. Oh, it gives titles, right? Does somebody else want to go while I find it?
Is
I'm
Yeah,
Jan-
wait- I'm
Let's
waiting.
put to the next person while she figures out her page.
yeah,
Yeah, how about that? Thank you.
I
I
have
appreciate
Jan
that.
Freeman on the list, but I haven't seen Jan. Is Jan here?
Yeah, she dropped out. She dropped out this afternoon. I sent you an email.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. But Catherine is here. Catherine Farrar.
I found it.
I think we may have lost Catherine as well. She mentioned just a minute ago that she had to take a call, but she definitely intends to write her letter. And she said that she thanks us for reaching out to her about this horrific place, as she mentioned in the chat. Mary Lisa, you mentioned that you were ready?
I found mine. Yeah, it was just bookmarked at the end of the page instead of the beginning.
So you do get to open us up after all.
Yes. Thank you. Open confession and letter to God. I wanted to come today while baby's bones were shred by drones. As the hand of one arm harmed another, I wanted to come. I pulled my toys from the closet while a brother discovered his brother hung. As another filmed his friend gunned down. As a sister identified her brother's body, skin stripped to ribbons, dark blood crusting. And then as his body stiffened, I wanted so badly, so urgently to come. So I came again and again, thinking of the man who loved men, driven out in the middle of nowhere, bound like a scarecrow to a fence by men, head bashed in, body left withered to a burnt crisp in a field full of sun. And the man chained to the hitch of a pickup truck, dragged over black asphalt until his arm and severed head rolled off onto someone else's street. As city blazed and the scent of skin thickened and sickened the air, as a canine mauled the face and neck of a man on the ground, unarmed and still, not resisting, I wanted to come. While 300 girls kidnapped from school, captives, having God only knows what being done to them, I don't want to imagine. I wanted to come 5 times, 6, until I could take no more, until I was crying, please stop, God, please come. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Lois here? Lois Howard?
I do not see Lois in the room right now, but if she pops in, I'll be sure to prod you, Ona.
Okay, great. So Ann Kyer. You're muted, Ann.
All right, now I got it. So this is a poem that seemed to be relevant at some level. It's called Portrait. The child, naked in her underpants, stands under chrome lights in a hospital basement up against a white backdrop. The doctor's photographer asks if she's cold. No, I'm okay. She looks front and center, sensing an inch of light under the drawn window shade. He shoots the cracks in her feet, her skin-tight arms. Turn your back for me, thus. She spins slowly as if he were fitting a dress.
Thank you. Marianne Miller?
I have this poem that cries out, which is what I feel like doing after hearing all of the comments tonight. Psalm. O diamond slices of rain, pierce the heads of the unjust, the forces of gun and gas. Rain destruction on the shooters, the polluters, the unholy indifferent. My enemies are rampant, their squints like lasers, finding the footsore, the swollen-eyed. See how faces are blue, like motherhood. Mary's veil piled up into an accidental hijab. The shelter is also the storm, with a voice like an oboe, chasing the weary. We are weary. We are. Save us, O rain. Thank you for the opportunity to be with all of you tonight.
Thank you, Marianne. Peter Murphy?
Thank you. When I was 6 years old, I was removed from my family that was abusive and put in a home for the next 7 or 8 months. And during that time, I thought I was in hell, but I was confused because I thought you had to be dead to go to hell. And I didn't know if I was dead or alive. And this is a poem written about that time. It's called The Stubborn Child, based on a grim fairy tale. His mother had taken him into her grave, where he continued to fidget. Quiet down, she yelled. We'll get no peace here too. But his arms kept lifting and falling, and his legs moved back and forth in perpetual dance. The boy wanted to please his mother, who loved him, who always gave him the best of what she had. But he could not find comfort in her grave, and continued to wander through those sleepless years, his skinny chest surging, as if it were still a home to breath. You're not dead yet, are you, little boy? She screamed, and smacked him with her bony hand, and chased him with a kitchen knife around her small compartment. She shoved him with her thin right arm so hard, he popped right out of the grave he had been trying to live in, and lay weak, half blind and covered with earth. The dead smells on his skin made the small boy dizzy. When he tried to walk, he fell, and he cried each day for years to live without stumbling. He does not mention any of this to his daughter, who sleeps her stubborn sleep each night as he stands in her room and prays through her restless years, waving his arms above her, sweeping and stirring the immaculate air. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Is Christine Salvatore here?
No, I'm afraid I do not see Christine in the room.
Well, I see Daniel Simpson in this one, so he's here.
I'm reading a poem about a situation that, because of activism, is not so much a problem anymore. But at one point, vehicles, particularly trucks, were not required to have beepers on them. And so I know that there were certainly blind people who were crushed to death or run over because of that. So this is called Broken Reverie. I am not going to write a political poem, but in my neighborhood, a truck is in reverse. It has been backing up for a long time. It beeps incessantly. It has ruined my reverie. When they were rebuilding the train station, trucks backed up all night long. Some people wrote the newspaper. Get rid of those beepers, they said. It is not good to write political poems. They are so obvious. That's why any minute now, I'm going to get back to my imagination. But my blind friend made a simple decision one day. Simple as, shall I wear the knit dress or wool pants to work? She was just going to buy a sandwich. She would leave her dog in the office and take her white cane. The truck had no beeper. It was hard to know in all that city noise whether to stand still or keep moving. Soon I will be able to stop writing polemics and start writing poetry. People want something fresh. They don't need me to repeat the obvious.
Thank you. Nathan Spoon.
Okay, here are two short poems linked in the chat that came from my joyously non-compliant autistic brain. This is called Bee Monster. All mouth, out of orbit due to an insatiable need to be orbited. At some point, there are clouds or waves filled with the foul kelp of cornering questions. Like a black hole yeeting a star through space, it was real when Monster queried, "Why do you think you carry a small stack of books with you?" Out of orbit is perhaps a phantasmagoria of blankness. It was real when the foolishness I was meant to feel oozed from the kelp instead. What I carried out of my own need was innocuous enough. It felt how pages smelled as I turned them. Like Don Quixote made a helmet, I wanted to make the books with their sturdy covers a shield. I succeeded, almost. Almost, except an impulse rose as I walked starrily away from Monster. Almost, except it is impossible to protect what I was protecting indefinitely. Naivety that is ready to crumble does. When it crumbles, its pieces fall into a womb where the thing most feared gestates. All mouth, all hunger, all claw, all tooth, all stir of disorder, I now will be, hidden and large, large, large as the thick-haired ocean of space. And my last poem is called Pink Notebook Sonnet. One or another of us always seems to be fumbling in solitude. Some days it admittedly is me. I mean, all that alters the sunlight falling now to water my bodily roots is atmosphere, is air. I could ask who was looking, but to what purpose, when the palmed sea slug of my heart, lost among waves, is opening a window or a random text. It is easy to be prepared for what comes next when there is more really than I can say. See, friend, this is my scar, and this is my scar, and this, leaving me some days grieving and proud that who I am is what constellations within the entire sky stand and even stand up for. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. JC Todd?
I'm unmuted now. It seems to me that when I'm, I think I would be classified as able. when I make efforts in the direction of stopping horrific occurrences, and I, you know, as a single person, for the most part, can't do that alone. I feel a sense of obligation that waits on me, and I think that's a good thing. But I'm going to read a poem about forgiveness because I think all of us who put so much effort into stopping situations that take a long time to stop and then are always in danger of recurring, that it can be very hard for us to forgive ourselves that we can't stop them or don't stop them or haven't stopped them this time. Ask who you must. Ask who you must to forgive you, brother, cousin, the dog you brought home. Ask who you must to love you, the woman on the corner telling the turning cars her ills, your grandmother, long dead, still bending over the stew pot, your child, for surely the child will not deny you. But if she does, then ask the birds who call all day long, their songs a conversation circling the earth. They are passing one to the other the love you long for and want to pass on. Ask them, lie down and listen. Ask the grass you crush for forgiveness and let song flow through you on its way to somewhere else. Thank you.
Diane Weiner.
Nathan, I'm amazed that right before I sat down, I thought maybe I have to read the poem that references the black hole. I was going to read something from Welcome to the Resistance, but it's quite an extraordinary, not coincidence. Neurodivergence, unity. What's that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't you also use the word phantasmagoric?
Mm.
I also love slugs. I love Nathan. It's not a secret. Okay. This is verse 5 from my book, The Golem Verses. Golem joins me. We ask questions. What spatial, tactile, and linguistic messages could be used to assure that everyone has access to the news about colliding neutron stars without sight or sound? Astrophysicists explain the vibrations, and yes, I am relieved, as I was with learning of solar eclipses' multi-sensory lives. There's even an app. A lattice, my hands, depicts shadowed crescents on cement. The fascism and eugenics so prevalent in the news are again refused. I remain conflicted about astronomy, considering people without food or shelter. Discovery of the origins of the universe, nevertheless, is unmistakably profound. If gold and platinum shatter in fragments careening off colliding neutron stars, those bits swallowed up by the black holes left behind are likely inhabited by fairies. Devonian remains of mollusks might have lithic gold and platinum traces for all we know. But the poetics of the first question seem lost, Golem thinks, quietly beside me in the woods. We are, after all, talking about the music of the stars. Thank you for being here, everyone.
Thank you, Diane. So I've come to the end of my list of poets. But is there any other poet here who would like to share work before we end this part of the program?
I would just like to share my deep gratitude for you all. I hope we can all give everyone who spoke just now another round of applause, because you are all just so good for my heart and blood pressure and soul just now. So thank you all for expressing all that vulnerability and beauty. I think it was such a good compliment to the hard things we're talking about today.
That is the genius of Taylor, bringing poetry and activism together.
Taylor, you are muted.
I said, well, thank you. The reason this series started and the book that then followed it was because I spend a lot of time at political poetry readings, which is a weird sentence to say, but it's true. And I know what it's like to go to a reading and be like, I feel supercharged and amazing, and I'm going to go home and change the world, and it's going to be wonderful. And then you wake up the next day and you have no idea what to do with yourself. Like, this is an experience I have had many, many, many times. And so the structure of these events and of the book coming together was because I wanted to look at people and go, you have all this energy, you have these poems, you have this information. Now, what are we going to do about it? And in this case, the answer to what are we going to do about it is we are going to write letters to the Department of Justice based on the template letter that I gave you. I'm going to repeat this for at least the 100th time. Please do not copy and paste, personalize the letter. Super important, especially since there aren't as many faces here as I'd like there to be. I want to make sure that each and every one of your letters punches its way through, because I do not want this to be something they can ignore any longer. If you are also able to fill out the online complaint form, please do that as well. When you click through to the link for the letter info, that link is there as well. So it should only take you a couple of seconds. I did it in a minute, maybe two. It should not take you a very long time. I've tried to give you all the information I can, who to address your letters to, where to address them, and a roundabout of what your letter should sound like. The thing I'm going to reinforce to you again is that what we are pushing here is that this is a civil rights violation, and that, frankly, it's cruel and unusual punishment. They don't try to claim that it's a punishment. They try to claim that it's a treatment. But the reality of a situation is it's cruel and unusual punishment. And we know what the problem with that is, so we know how to phrase that as being an issue. If any of you all need help with your letters after this, or if you want more information, or if you just want to ask me questions, you can totally do that. You all have my email addresses or you wouldn't be here. So if you wake up tomorrow morning and you go, crap, what were we supposed to do? Email me. I will reinforce all of this for you, because I know what it's like to have a lot of feelings and your brain just sort of goes blank and you're like, what was I supposed to be doing? So if it comes to that, email me and I will redirect after I have a very long sleep, because it has been a very long week trying to put this together. Also, I apologize if the invitation to this felt very last minute and you were like, you could have told us sooner. The only reason that happened that way is because I was immediately made aware that the shock ruling had been overturned and was like, we need people on this now. So I apologize for the brief turnover window. Know that it has been all I thought about for the last 2 weeks, and I'm in the middle of a master's program, so that's saying something. But this is all I've been able to think about for the last 2 weeks, and wanting to give you all the information you could possibly want without overwhelming you with the darkness of all this, because I get that it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming for me, especially being a disabled person myself, as many of you are. It's incredibly hard to take in this information and not over personalize it and not imagine ourselves in those shoes, which is maybe good for our empathy, but is probably not good for our function. So that's the mission I send you out with, is don't waste this energy. The rage and the heartbreak and the discomfort that you feel right now is capable of fixing this if you direct it in the right direction. I've tried to give you all the information I can, but if something is missing or you need more information or you just want direction to more resources, I can absolutely offer that to you. There are videos by survivors I can point you to. There is much more content out there. I just didn't want to sort of swamp you all in unbearable emotions so then you couldn't move forward with it. Does anybody else have any questions or comments before we wrap things up around here?
I have one, Taylor, if I may.
Yes.
Sorry to cut you off, Mary Lisa. Mary Lisa's next. Our friend and ally Dion made a great point in the chat about making sure we post this on our Facebooks afterwards too. We would be in your debt if everybody here tonight could commit to using whatever platforms of your choice to spread the link, to show the letter template, to stress, as Taylor said, that this is a template for people to use in order to gather their thoughts, and anything anyone is able to do to educate those who would, have values that line up with this mission, which I hope would be a lot of people. We are much obliged for anything you can do to try and make them aware. Thank you for using your platforms to help spread what Taylor has so courageously put on hers.
I've made it through this whole thing without crying, Michael. You're not allowed to make me cry now.
All right, so don't cry because we need to hear from Mary Lisa, and then we had one other hand up. So please, Mary Lisa.
It's okay. I don't remember now. It doesn't matter. I just wanted to say, but I did want to thank Taylor and Ona and you and everybody else involved in this project. I don't know, maybe it had something to do with taking the energy. I'm not sure. It was something related to something Taylor was saying, but it's okay. It'll come back to me.
There was another hand up.
I remember, it was timing is everything. You said that it was just overturned 2 weeks ago and that it's very important for us to do now. And all I wanted to say was timing is everything. It came back to me. So yeah. Thanks.
I saw another hand, but now I can't see it. Who had their hand up just now? I have too many screens and now I can't see everyone.
If anybody else wanted to comment, please go ahead and unmute yourself and go for it.
I have a special request.
Yes.
I was wondering if Ona Gritz might read a poem.
Oh. Sure. I don't know.
You have one prepared. If you don't have one prepared, but there's one in the book.
No,
there isn't any.
No. I wrote the introduction, but I didn't.
No, I know. Why did I think you wrote a poem in the book? I made that up in my head.
Yeah. I can't think of a poem that would be the right send off for tonight, so I'll pass, but thank you for the invite.
Well, everyone should read Ona Gritz's poetry and all the other poets who are here tonight, who are all wonderful people, and everyone else who's here who's not a poet, who is a wonderful person. You might be a poet also. But if you have never read Ona Gritz's poetry, please go ahead.
Thank you for that, Diane.
I feel like a bad co-editor that I didn't say that, but yes, that's awesome.
I second Diane's motion. Ona, you will definitely be on the spot the next time we are all sharing something like this together. So I hope you have something, because I agree very much so. Very grateful for your voice in the charge.
Yes.
Taylor, do you have a poem you want to share?
Oh hell, no! This was all my brain space for a long time. I cannot improv right now. That is not going to work. If somebody has a request or something, I could probably dig it up, but off the top of my head, I try not to read at my own events because it feels very, I don't know, self-indulgent in a way that I don't love. So I try not to read at my own events because I don't know, ego and stuff. But if somebody has a specific one to hand, and the people in this room happen to own more of my poems than anyone else on earth probably, so if someone has one to hand, feel free to ask.
We do have somebody who is bravely offering to land the plane tonight after all of the amazing talent that we were just showered in. And if you are willing to help us out, Mr. Spoon, I think that would be a fantastic way to end things today. I got some good percussion leading in for him. I like that, whoever's providing that.
I've unmuted, and now I'm clicking on the poem, which was in word gathering, in part thanks to Diane. And I'm very grateful. This is a tiny poem called "Will You Help Me Build It?" Unless we are continuously building it together, there is something missing in the air between us. It is amorphous and helps you, help me, hold myself and you up. Without it, my mind and words keep going through paper tiger shredding positions, like the proverbial elephant trampling the real room we are sharing, until we can no longer bear such sharing. Our mutual construction keeps the wolf of the elephant away. It puts roots into soil so rich it can be tilled by hand. It is a wheel of care opening like a diamond onto new social air.
Thank you for putting a button on the feeling. That very much did it. I'm incredibly proud of what we're building, and I'm incredibly proud that y'all are here and willing to be part of it. This isn't easy. I know it isn't easy. Hearing about this, feeling about this, being in the space with this isn't easy. And you're choosing to show up, and you're choosing to march on with this information and do your part in making it better means the world to me and to Ona and to disabled communities at large and various other people who I am momentarily drawing a blank about because I have too many feelings to collect my thoughts correctly. Just thank you all for your work and your hearts and your energies. I think it's time I let you go now, and maybe go write your letters if it's not too late where you are. I am incredibly proud to do this with you and to charge forward with you from here. I can stay and hang out because it seems like people might have questions they don't want to ask like in front of the group. So if anybody wants to stay and ask follow-up questions or has concerns or whatever, I will stay and field them. But otherwise, be free, be brave, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you, Taylor.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Taylor.
Mike, thank you so much for keeping things moving. It's great.
Oh, my pleasure. I am just so glad to be able to stand side by side with everyone here today. And although it's probably not the most important point, damn, you're all some great poets. That was just lovely. That really, really brought my blood pressure to the right place after going into that dark space of having to think about what we're here to confront. So you guys are all an inspiration to me. I love my poets. I really love you all.
All the poets here this evening are in our collection, except I think 2, and I'm like super proud of the gaggle of poets that we have somehow amassed. I say to Ona often, how the hell did we do that? How the hell do we know these people? I am often amazed.
Taylor, if I may, I think you did an amazing job. I lost it again. I do that. I get a little anxious. I think
fine.
Going back.
We're a very patient group of brains. Take your time.
Oh, I remember. Okay, see, See how quickly it comes back to me? Yes, because you know what neurodivergence is. So yeah, I lose it for a second and then I remember. And then I lose it again. No, I wanted to say that I didn't expect that. I knew that this would be helping others and be part of helping others. I didn't realize how much it would help me to hear other readers and know that I'm not alone. I just wanted to thank you for that. So, you know, as much as you feel like maybe we've given you tonight, you've also given us something wonderful. So thank you.
Well, if I do anything right in the premise of this series, this book, this exercise, it's that we realize that we're all kind of sitting at home thinking about the same things. We're all kind of sitting at home trying to figure out how change works and trying to kind of take it apart and put it back together. And I hope that's what the collection does. People tell me that's what the collection does, is that it makes them feel less alone in all the things they're concerned about. I think it's a very hopeful book. I don't think people look at a resistance book and think of it as a hopeful thing. But what I always say to people is, if there was not, if it was impossible, if it was hopeless, we wouldn't still be talking about it. There's nothing hopeless about resistance and about talking about ugly topics, because we wouldn't still be doing it if we didn't believe it could be better. And I'm going to be completely straight with you all. When I was doing the research for this, there were several times where I hit a wall, right? I hit a wall in the research, and it was like, what if everything has been tried? Like, what if we can't fix this? What if all the doors have been knocked on and this is just the doom that is going to continue to be the doom? And then I spoke to one person who's not here this evening, who is going to be my boss, Lydia Fecto, who I know some of you know. And I was like, I don't know whose door to knock on. I don't know what to do next. I don't want to give up. Help me. And she was immediately like, here's who you need to write letters to. Here's what you need to do next. Here are your next steps. And I was like, oh, thank God someone knows, because I was just completely like, we're doomed. Like all the routes have been tried. So know that the road to hope comes to those places. You come to a point where it's like, we're done. There's no further to go. And then somehow there is every time. And it's astonishing and awe-inspiring. And I think poetry, when it works, even unhappy poetry, is about the idea that there is always another way and there is always a next step. And you may not see it right this second, and that's okay, but it's there somewhere all the time. I'm not a religious person by any means whatsoever, but there's a Christian doctrine that's something like hope is available to all people at all times. And I think people use it wrong. I think people use it to mean like, be happy, toxic positivity bullshit. Ugh. But the reality is, what it means is it's out there. And when you're ready for it, if you go reaching for it, you'll find it. It's okay if you're not ready for it right now. It's going to hang out there and wait for you, because hope is stubborn like that, as Emily Dickinson so geniusly put it, who would have been one of us and was very much disabled, and no one talks about that, and I don't know why.
Hope is the thing with feathers.
Yes.
That's what she said.
There's also a spin-off poem that includes the sentence, hope is a stupid yellow bird that continues to bang its head against the glass, etc., which is a take I much prefer, as this idea of like, it is painful and stubborn and belligerent and fantastic. When I'm overly emotional, I tend to lean too hard on my vocabulary and start pulling for words on random strings, but you know what I'm saying.
Very much so. Mary Lisa, I saw you in the chat. I just resent the link for the letter itself, and that is something that you can post. That Google Doc is unlocked, as I understand it, so anyone should be able to pull it up. So it has the basics of the letter, which breaks down the situation, as well to send it. And we also posted the notes. I didn't repost that because I didn't want to just clog you with links. But yeah, if you scroll up, the PDF is up there too. And,
I got that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Apologies in advance if my notes are jumbled or confusing. They were really only for me, and I tend to write my presentation notes kind of in gaps because I tend to want to be organic and not like rattle scripts at people.
No, I think going through the notes, even though they, are as you describe, I think they hit the points really well. And anybody who wants to get right to the heart of why this is such an issue would be able to glean that really quickly. I do have to hop off, but I want to send my love again to everybody. You are all just amazing to hear from, and it was a total honor to be able to help in the small way that I could. I know my letter is sure as heck going right the heck out, and I will be here ready for whenever the next fight is upon us. I'm sure there is a lot more yellow birds banging their head against the walls that need us to amplify their cause, and I am all here for that. So thank you again, Taylor and Ona, for organizing this, and I'm just so proud to help. Love you all. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you for everything.
Oh, you got it. Absolutely.
I'm gonna sign off as well. Thank you
Good
again
night.
so much.
Good night, wonderful people.
Good night, yes. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Bye, bye, Ona and Dan. Bye,
Dan,
Sarah.
Hi, everybody.
I'll pass the message
Hi,
on.
Nathan.
Bye, Nathan. It's good to finally meet you.
Yes. Yeah, it's really nice.
Yes, it's good to finally meet you. Thank you for reaching out. That means a lot to us.
Bye.
We did it.
You did it. You did.
And I didn't sob the whole time, which is miraculous. I was prepared to cry my way through it. So, hey.
Did you see Nathan's note in the chat?
I didn't, no.
It said crying is important.
Yeah, I was prepared to sob my way through it. So the fact that we got through it, and I like in the middle of my shtick, I accidentally closed my notes. So I was just going off of what I could remember from my notes. I was like, oh crap.
Oh. Well, I thought it went really well.
Thank you for your help. This was huge, and I know this wasn't easy on you either. I know that as disabled people, this is really close, and it was really hard. And I appreciate that you did that anyway, because I know you could have not. But this felt really close to my heart, and I'm really glad we did it. And now I feel like I can sleep for a year because holy crap.
You definitely earned many good nights sleep.
Right. I haven't eaten a full meal or slept a full night in probably 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Just because when I get overly like anxious and worried and things, I don't eat well and I don't sleep much. So I've been like sleep deprived and half starved for about 2 weeks. So I'm glad that we did it, but I am glad that it is done. And now it is someone else's work for at least a little while until I have to check in with people and be like, are you writing your letters? Are you doing the thing? But for now, at least.
Feed yourself food and feed yourself rest.
Right. Thank you for everything. Their project is bigger because of you than I ever could have imagined it being. So thank you 100 times over and then some. I hope we don't have a big reason to do this too soon, but if we do, we will do it.
We'll talk about it. Yeah. Okay. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.